Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. It is a good day today. We get to talk about Atelier. As anybody that follows this channel knows, I am a big time fan of the wholesome goodness of Atelier, and I have been able to get some hands-on time with the upcoming Atelier Sophie 2. Preview embargo has lifted, so these are my first impressions of the game. I have played about 2 hours of it, which is the limit of what I can cover within the preview section. Really, it is just the narrative introduction as well as the first field of enemies to fight through, so you're not going to see too much. There's not going to be any spoilers, obviously, and Koei Tecmo has asked that I don't give away any plot points, so I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to briefly introduce what this game is about, talk about some of the things that I love about it, and in fact how it has restored my faith in the Atelier series. In fact, that's probably the wrong way to put it. I've always loved the Atelier games, and I certainly loved Riser and Riser 2, but they were a deviation of what I loved about Atelier. And Sophie recenters the series in what I particularly love about this series. So for me, it's kind of a return to tradition with Atelier, and that is certainly a good thing from my perspective. So we'll talk about a bit of that in the video as well. So the first thing to know about Atelier Sophie 2 is that it actually takes place in a different world to the original Atelier Sophie, which does sound odd, I know, and I'll explain in a moment. But why I think Gust did this was as a development convenience. It has allowed them to take a blank slate approach to an awful lot of Atelier Sophie rather than being beholden to what kind of already existed. They really have had a fresh start with this, to the point that other than the characters, it really does feel like a completely new Atelier game, which is what they needed to do. But it's also a plot hook that I quite liked right from the opening moments. I was a little bit concerned with how I'd step back into the world of Atelier Sophie, having played so many other Atelier games since. This way I was able to take a fresh look at everything myself as well. So what happens is Sophie gets dragged into this dream world in the opening cutscene. So in the first couple of minutes of the game, she gets dragged into this mysterious dream world by a kind of godlike being that she doesn't get to talk to. All the other denizens in this world are introduced to this person when they get pulled into it, but for whatever reason, Sophie wasn't. Anyway, I don't know what the ramifications of that are. Those are revelations to come later down the plot, but it does set up a sense of mystery right from the start. Why is Sophie there? Why did she not have the meeting with this godlike being? And what is this world really about? The world itself is a dream world, so it is a place that people go to fulfill their great dreams or destinies or whatever you want to term it, at which point they're allowed to leave. Until then, they're effectively prisoners, although it's not really a prison system. They're free to go wherever they like within this world, but it is not a real world. It is a dreamverse as such. Now, this concept really caught my interest right from the outset because we have seen a lot of games recently, particularly in the JRPG genre, that have engaged with something similar to this, where you can remove yourself from the real world, put yourself in a kind of utopia environment, and whether you're there to fulfill a dream or just to escape your problems in the real world, it is a place that is constructed by you to be superior to the real world. So games like the Caligula Effect last year, which was a sequel to the original Caligula Effect, both games deal with the same topic. Monarch is coming out later this year, and it seems to be covering a very similar theme. There's also Blue Reflection 2, which is Gust's own game, which also has a similar idea, where you're removing yourself from the real world to experience this fantasy. It is relevant to us for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the state of the real world, in the real world as in where we're all living, is so terrible at the moment that a bit of escapism is certainly a desirable thing. So video games themselves are a form of escapism, but this is escapism within escapism, and that idea is certainly a warm and comforting one if it's presented in a way like this Atelier game does it. It's also increasingly possible for us to do it in the real world. So through the use of technologies like VR and AR and what's coming up on the horizon, we are able to start to construct reality around us to paint over the things that we don't like in the real world. And like anything else, any major social change, because this is certainly going to have some major social implications and ramifications, the artists in the world are trying to engage with this theme. And it's not just video games, you're also seeing it in film, in literature, in the visual arts. There is a lot of discourse happening around this topic at the moment, this idea of constructed realities, how we interact with these virtual worlds or these utopias, and whether that is a superior state of being to being in the real world. It is a topic that really fascinates me. I didn't expect to play an Atelier game that was going to really address this topic, although based on Blue Reflection 2, perhaps I should have expected something like it. But that is exactly what this game is dealing with. It is not like the Caligula effect, in that the Caligula effect was obviously very intellectual about it all. It was very philosophical about it. It was subversive in a lot of ways. It wanted to challenge you. This game is more wholesome and good-natured, and it's more a comfort food kind of thing. It is pure escapism, but it is a nice theme. It's a fun theme. It is something that is interesting, and just tracking how it's been portrayed across a wide range of different video games is certainly interesting as a trend. But anyway, that is a long digression for a preview. Obviously, I haven't played anywhere near enough of the narrative to have a real sense of how this game deals with that theme, and that'll be something to discuss in the review itself. This preview was more to talk about my initial impressions, and they're actually very positive. One of the things that I was immediately attracted to in this game, in terms of its gameplay mechanics, was the fact it is a return to pure turn-based stuff. So Atelier Ryza tried to action things up a bit. It was still turn-based, but it had a much more fluid approach to the turn-based style, and it felt quite pacey at times. This one is just pure turn-based. If you don't press buttons, then nothing happens for a very long time. So you can take your time, you can kind of just enjoy the very traditional turn-based combat style. And I didn't think Atelier was going to go back to that, especially after Ryza was so popular. I thought that Gust was going to be set in its stone from now on, that it was going to do this action turn-based combat style. So this one feels like a love letter to tradition for people who are fans of traditional Atelier. So that was off to a really nice start. I also like that because they've set it in a dream world, they can mess around with monster levels and stuff. So even though you start at level 20, reflecting the fact that this is a sequel and now Sophie is an accomplished adventurer and alchemist, you still get to fight the Punies as your first enemies. They're just level 20 now as well. So they've scaled things up, and mechanically it doesn't feel like you're playing as an accomplished adventurer anymore, but within the narrative it does, and once again it allows Gust to give you your favorite enemies to fight all over again. So that was a nice thing as well. So in the one environment that I've been able to explore so far, it looks nice, large, and it does suggest that there's going to be a lot of exploration involved. There was one tough enemy battle that is totally avoidable, but suggests that you'll want to come back to previous environments later on down the track in the game. So it has all the elements that you expect from a modern JRPG. It's not limited in terms of the size of environments. There's plenty to see and do, and it's all very good looking too. I should have mentioned this at the start of the video. I'm recording this on medium settings on my PC because my PC isn't quite up to high settings even on a relatively modest game like this, and you'll see frame rate drops and stuff like that, but that's the PC. On low settings, the frame rate's fine, and if you have the PlayStation 5 version or a PC that's able to run it at maximum settings, you are going to have a very visually pleasing game. In fact, even on the low settings, it is very visually pleasing. It's just more art direction rather than technical brilliance. But Gust has always been very good at that. They've always had talented artists at doing a lot with limited budgets. And this one does have that nice blend of wholesome anime and light fan service, which is really, for me anyway, that's Atelier at its best. One thing I did really appreciate and notice was just the way it transitions out of battles. And it might sound like a small thing, but in so many JRPGs, the transition into battle is, it takes you out of the main world, drops you in a space, and then has you fight enemies. When you defeat them, the screen fades to black, and then your characters get dropped back into the field. In this game, you actually transition smoothly into and out of battles, and the way that Sophie puts her weapon away, and then the camera pans around her at the end of a battle, it's just a nice touch. It's certainly not, mind-blowing, but it is a really pleasant thing, and just overwhelmingly my impression of this game so far is that it is pleasant. It is for people who are existing fans of Atelier. I don't think anybody who's not an existing fan of Atelier is going to pay attention to this one, but that's okay. This one is for the fans, and I think they've done a great job of delivering that. As a fan of Atelier, I can't wait to get stuck into more of it. Anyway, that's enough for this video. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you're an Atelier fan, I'd love to hear if you're looking forward to playing Sophie 2, or if you wanted something else. Let me know what you think of the footage as well, and let's just run through the standard boilerplate stuff at the end. Please do mash that like and subscribe button if you enjoy my videos. That way you won't miss them as I upload more. And if you want to support what we're doing on digitallydownloaded.net, both across this YouTube channel and the website and everything else that we do, you can back us on Patreon, and there's a link in the description below this video. By backing us on Patreon, which you can do for just $1 a month, you will get access to a 56-page and growing magazine as well, which isn't just about video games, it's also about Japanese film, Japanese music, art, culture, travel, tourism, food. It's a kind of magazine for people that like Japan. And if you're interested in knowing more about a country that produces games like Atelier, then that magazine will be a useful resource for you. All right, thanks very much for tuning in, everyone. Let's look forward to my review of Atelier Sophie soon enough. In the meantime, we'll see you at the next video.